Hey, everybody, it's Kevin Anderson here, host of the Ask the Educator podcast. And in this episode, I got Adam Okada with me as my co host. And we are going to tackle what I think is a very critical topic, which is getting started in sterile processing. Adam, you suggested this one, and I think it's a great idea. And the question we're trying to kind of um, address for people here is how do they get started in sterile processing? And both of us were hiring managers. Both of us were new to sterile processing at some point. And so maybe a good place to start is how did you get started and how did you get in? What was your break? For me, it was a little bit unique, but we'll get into that a little bit. But how did you get in? And, were there any lessons learned that you could share from that process when you got into sterile processing? Let's start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started because I was living with my parents after college and they wanted me out of their house. And so my dad brought home a flyer as a not so subtle message to get out. And it was for a sterile processing class. And so I took the class because I was like, I don't know what this is. I'll just, get my dad off my back. I'll go take this course. And the
Sure.
teacher was actually Sharon Rojo, who
Uh,
works with us at Healthmark. And so he is really to blame for everything that I do. It's his fault because he taught the class and he
Perfect.
was really a really good teacher and really got people passionate about sterile processing. If you've ever seen Sharon speak, he
Mm,
inspires that kind of passion. He's just so passionate about sterile processing. And so I went to get my volunteer hours because I was taking a certification class and I needed my 400 hands-on hours. And so I took the certification course and I did my hours at the same time. And when I was at the hospital getting my hours, they were impressed and they saw something in me and decided to offer me a job. I was only about a month in when they offered me the position. So that was really cool and it was a really good experience. But that's how I got into sterile processing was the course and then getting the hours and then getting hired. I know you came in a little bit later in that process. You were already in healthcare.
yeah. Oh gosh. I'm so glad you shared that, by the way, because I didn't realize you got hired because you were doing your hours, your like volunteer hours. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for me it was a little bit different. As some of our listeners will know, I came from the operating room, so I was an operating room nurse and learned all the circulating duties, scrub duties, all that stuff. I even managed the operating room as well. But at some point in my career, there was a um, management position for sterile processing that was open, and being that I had some experience and I was already working in this facility, they had asked me to apply for it. So the funny thing for me is that I knew nothing. I knew nothing about sterile processing. And I even remember going through um, training on how to use the IUSS sterilizer. And as soon as they started talking about biologicals, I was like, wait a minute, what? I'm like, this is way over my head. I don't understand. And so I was actually pretty intimidated by having to make that change. Now, I did ultimately decide to do that. And I think what helped me a lot, and I think a lot of people out there in healthcare, maybe they're in environmental services, or maybe they're in dietary where they're kind of running food trays or whatever, and they're looking to maybe make their next step up into a maybe a bit higher level pay job in the healthcare setting. All right. I know sterile processing doesn't get paid what they should. Okay. I'm not saying that, but maybe it's higher than some of these other positions. And so they're looking for a job in sterile processing. And it's kind of similar to my situation in a sense that I really didn't know anything. And you might not really know anything either, and that's okay. So I want you to know, as a former hiring manager, if you're listening to this, it's okay if you don't know anything. What I would say is, um, do a little bit of research, do a Google search, do a ChatGPT search, do some social media research on sterile processing, learn about what it is that we do. For me, I was set up for success by my surgical services director. They sent me to train on the job at another facility, our flagship facility in the healthcare system for several weeks, um, side by side with other sterile processing techs. Now, that opportunity was given to me by, things just kind of lining up. But if you're trying to apply for a sterile processing job in your current healthcare institution and you're applying from another department, perhaps you could shadow just like you were doing for your certification course and take that opportunity to like blow them away, right? Ask really good questions, take interest, volunteer to help out and do some things, like that would be huge, right? I mean, it says a lot, right? About, I know you're not going to say it, but it says a lot about you that you're in there for volunteer hours and they wanted to hire you. That's huge opportunity. So I would definitely say to take that. Um, if you're already in the healthcare institution, try to work with your sterile processing department. Hey, can I come in and shadow? Can I observe? Can I just see what you do? And that's also a good way to kind of find out, is this job good for me? Like, can I stand the sight of blood? I don't know. Does it make me faint? Does it make, you know what I mean? Like, those are
Yeah.
some basic things that we should all kind of have an idea of before we say, oh, yeah, it pays more money. I want that. Like, there's
Yes.
some things about the job you should know before you want to make that commitment. So, maybe what are some other things that we can help them with? Like, what would you as a hiring manager be looking for? We see a lot of different things, as hiring managers. You were a hiring manager, I was hiring manager. What kind of things might we see or might you expect to see on maybe a resume or some other things that we can share with the listeners to help them get started in sterile processing?
Well, I think you hit on what I look for the most, which is I want somebody who cares about the job. And I've hired people from outside of departments a ton of times,
Mhm.
but it was always somebody who came to me and said, "Hey, I really want to work in sterile processing. I looked it up, I did some research. I really think this is going to be a good spot for me. Can I come in and just observe? You're not even like in there
Yeah.
to do anything. I just want to observe for an hour."
Yeah.
And like doing those kinds of steps, if you're working in a hospital already, is huge because those are the people I almost always would hire those people and I would try to like recruit them because I knew if they were willing to give up just a little bit of time and a little bit of energy to come to me and express interest, then I knew that they had kind of that passion or that caring about the job that they really needed. What you don't want to do, and I did this as a hiring manager and in my previous life, I wanted to be a writer and I would submit things to publishers and agents and things like that. And they always talked about the reject pile because
Yeah.
they want to reject
Yeah.
everything. They don't want to spend the time reading an entire manuscript or a book or whatever it is.
Mm,
They want to just reject things as quickly as possible. So, and hiring managers do really a similar thing where we
yes.
look at resumes and we will try to reject immediately. So, if somebody basically does not mention sterile processing on their resume, then I know they're looking for a job and they just happened across an open position that was in sterile processing and then sent their resume to me. Those were immediate rejects for me. I mean, that's great that they're looking for a job, but I
Yeah.
want somebody who wants this job. And so somebody that cares about or knows what sterile processing is all about. The other thing I really look for, and I know it's a pet peeve of yours, is like if you don't take the time to get mistakes off of your resume. I had a guy who misspelled. He had his name at the top of the resume, and then his name was further down the resume, and he misspelled it the second time. Very common name. I don't remember what it was, and I apologize to the person because I just immediately rejected because he misspelled his own name in the resume. And
Yeah.
so, if you are not able to take the time to do a good resume, then my thought as a hiring manager is usually doesn't have attention to detail. And it's unfortunate that it's typo, but at the same time, you really should catch those kinds of things. How about you as a hiring manager? Any kind of things you would look for in people that you were hiring?
Um, for sure. I mean, and you obviously you touched on some of them. I mean, it is a very, very frustrating thing because, uh, we're all looking to fill the position. We want the position filled. And so when an applicant, uh, doesn't take care of their resume, especially when we have help with, Grammarly and, spell check and all this stuff, um, it, it's really frustrating. And to your point, we want to get through all the resumes as fast as possible, and that's the reality of it. You want to get to the few really good applicants that you might invite for an interview. But I'll tell you, even here's another one. HR will often weed out a lot of people that you don't even realize. And sometimes they're people you're interested in. So I'll give you an example. There were times where I knew other people from different departments because they came and dropped things off to us or whatever, and they expressed interest. They're like, hey, I saw there was an opening. Is there any chance I could get an interview? And I would tell them, yeah, that's great. Submitted a resume. And for whatever reason, and this is the part that I don't know, but sometimes your HR business partner will either they themselves or use an AI tool to weed through these resumes. And that's a completely legitimate way of doing it, but there are some frustrations involved with that you have to be aware of. And sometimes that resume, even though you had this conversation with the manager, sometimes that resume doesn't make it to them. All right. It just doesn't get
Yep.
sent to them. So you might have to say, um, to the hiring manager, hey, have another conversation, especially take advantage if you happen to interface with them and you know them. Um, Say, hey, I did put my application in, just want to let you know, in case you don't get it. And so there were multiple times where that happened to me, and I had to reach out to HR and I said, hey, so and so is submitting a resume. Please forward it to me when you get it. And that happened numerous times. So I want to make
Me
sure that
too. Yeah.
people understand that if they get ghosted, if they don't if they don't get a response, or sometimes they'll apply and they'll get an immediate rejection. Like, sorry, we're
Yep.
looking somewhere. That's a definite indicator that AI just knocked your
Yep.
resume out. Okay. And sometimes that happens because of preferred qualifications not being met. Certification may be one of them, right? I prefer that certification, that this applicant has certification, but if they don't have it, they might get boom, kicked out based on the volume of
Yep.
resumes. So there are a number of reasons why that might happen. Don't get discouraged. You sometimes are going to have to make a personal call or an email or just stop by and say, hey, I just want to let you know. I put the resume in and then it told me I'm already rejected. I didn't even know how that could happen that fast. Well, it does happen that fast sometimes. So that's a big one. Um, reach out personally, let it be known that you applied. That's a big one.
Yeah,
Um,
I think, I had several of my best employees did that.
yeah,
They
yep,
persevered, and that's you got to
yep,
have perseverance to get a good career, the career that you want.
yep.
Um, Anybody that comes to my door, anybody that says, "Hey, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm interested in the position." Whether EVS or food service, whatever. If you're in the hospital, if you're outside, don't be afraid to call the hospital. And I tell my students this all the time: call the hospital. Say, hey, can you connect me to the manager of sterile processing? The person at the front desk is
Mm,
trained to look that person up and forward you. And now
great
you've
point.
got a contact info and you can leave your name, your phone number, just say, hey, I'm so and so and I'm interested in a position in sterile processing. I really love sterile processing. I really want to get in, whatever it is. And just let them know who you are. Here's my name. And you're right.
Yep,
AI will reject if you're not certified or you're in a class and you want to get certified. You can get your 400 hours on the job. You just have to get through that AI blockade of,
yeah.
rejecting your resume. So I think taking that initiative to really go through and really get to the right person and then make yourself like introduce yourself and let them know who you are. I think that is a huge part of getting a job in SPD.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, if if somebody came and tell me if I'm wrong, but if someone came to your inbox, their resume or whatever, and they had, say, no experience in sterile processing, but they took the provisional certification through HSPA, and they're actually technically certified with that foundational knowledge just without the experience. I mean, wouldn't that be an amazing testament to them preparing themselves for a job that they didn't yet have? I mean, that would be like, oh my gosh, why don't I always get resumes or people like this? This is amazing. So that would be
Yeah.
huge, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And if somebody's taken that initiative to like let me know that their resume is coming in and that they have this provisional certification, I would rather take a person who takes that initiative and who cares enough to reach out over a person that maybe has 2, 3 years of experience, but just sends their resume in and is like, whatever. If they call me, they call me. So even if you're experienced in the field and you have a resume and you're sending it in, just take the initiative to make a connection so that they know who you are, they know your name, and they know to let HR know. Like you said, you could reach out to HR and say, hey, this person's going to apply. I know they're not certified. Just send me their resume anyway so that I can interview them. So that you can get through it. Just like what I was talking about with writing, there's all these blockades or walls in the way of getting you to the job. And the first one is that HR or AI hurdle where they just sort of scan a resume real quick and they look for a specific thing or a specific amount of experience, and then they'll reject based on that. And even if you don't, you have to reach out to the manager in that case because they can override and say, hey, I
Yes.
want this person to interview anyway. The interview, by the way, speaking of that, is the second hurdle. So I kind of wanted to ask you because you've done, I'm sure, a number of
Yeah.
interviews in your time.
Yes.
What are you looking for in an interview? What's that interview process like?
Oh gosh, partly you want to just get to know the person. Yeah, for me, I don't know about you, but I would try to make it, less intimidating. Interviewing for any job is kind of an intimidating thing, especially if you don't really have experience in that um, industry to stand on already. So you try to, break the ice, get to know the person a little bit. Obviously, you're not asking formal personal questions like that are illegal. You're not going there, but you just want to get to know the person.
Yeah.
What's their story? How did they come to have an interest in the industry, in the sterile processing position? Those are huge because I'll tell you, I mean, some people and I trust me, I value honesty. I totally value honesty. I don't want anybody lying to me as a manager and all that, especially in sterile processing. You got to be able to trust people. But I've had people come in an interview and say, and I'll ask them, why this position? Why sterile processing? Well, it pays more than my job in environmental services or whatever. And I'm like, okay, timeout. Like I understand. Like this is part of the reason why any of us look for another job is to get better pay. And I applaud the honesty in this case, but there has to be something more. Like I looked it up and this looks like a role where I can make a difference in healthcare. One that I can feel like I have purpose and get behind and even though I understand there might be rough days, it'll still be a purpose-driven profession that I can build upon for the rest of my career, right? Like come at it a little bit differently than just it pays $1 more an hour, or you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Show some interest in the industry that hey, you looked it up, you understand that there's a lot of you know. Opportunity that not every job has in a sense where there is that purpose behind it. So that's a huge one for me.
Agree.
The other thing is that's really important with jobs in the hospital, and this is where we have to understand, I think, in this day and age where there's a lot of hybrid work, remote work, and things like that, understand that in sterile processing and operating room, all these departments work together. Pre-op, post-op, operating room, sterile processing. We all interconnect in all these other procedural areas as well. So being on time and being reliable is huge. Okay. Like, maybe for a hybrid job or where you don't have to punch a clock, not that big of a deal, maybe. Maybe there's more flexibility in some of these other jobs, right? Sterile processing, unfortunately, isn't one of them. All right. So if you have to have some sort of flexibility in your shit. Now, some managers are a little bit more flexible. I'm not going to say that it's always written in stone or whatever, but it is more written in stone than other jobs, right? Like one of the most important things or values that you can bring to the table is being reliable. Show up for your shift, show up on time because sterile processing can go on a tailspin if somebody doesn't show up. No call, no
Yeah.
show, or you're calling in all the time, or you're playing this is how many call-ins I get every cycle. You know what I mean? Every 6 months I can call in 3 times or whatever. Like, uh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but please do not apply. Do not apply if you're gonna play that game. So those are some things that I think about when it comes to hiring. Also, be open-minded. One thing I tried with new hires, especially if they came in with some experience, was like I'd lay out some instruments and ask them to name them or tell me what they're for or tell me something you can find on them that's maybe wrong, like pitting or something that, it wasn't maybe super obvious, but it wasn't like super technical where it was impossible. So like keep an open mind. I had people who would just tell me no, like I don't want to do that. And I'm like, okay, well, all right. Well, that's a problem. Like you
Yeah.
have to because I straight up would tell them, I don't need you to get everything right. I just want you to give me your best try at this. Like
Yeah.
it's not like I just want to gauge what you are coming to the table with in terms of knowledge. It's not your hiring is not going to be dependent on how you perform in this right now. I'm just trying to gauge where you're
Right.
at.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the interview I'd say it's really important and it's not important at all. And what I mean by that is
yep,
you do want to present a good when you're walking into an interview, what I would tell my students is, you always want to come in and understand what that person is looking for because the hiring manager, us,
yep,
we've been doing this. We look for a specific set of traits, right? Or attributes or things that we look for in somebody that we say, okay, that person will be a good fit for my department. And keep in mind that we're probably interviewing 3 to 5 people. If it's a lead tech or supervisor, something that's a little more sought after, maybe you're interviewing 8 to 10 people. You're seeing a lot of people. So you have to do something to kind of differentiate yourself from the pack. And I think what I used to do when I would do interviews, and I'm not bragging, right? I do interview well when I go in for an interview, but I think what I do is I prepare for the interview a lot. So I'll
yeah.
research the hospital. I'll look up what their mission statement is. I'll look up what their
Oh,
values are.
yes.
I've had people that when I came in and I could list their principal values that were like, oh my gosh, like we've never had anyone in an interview do that. But just taking it took like 30 seconds in the car before the interview for me to look on their website and memorize the values because there was 3 or 5 or whatever it was. And just to say, hey, I align with those values. I really like what you guys are doing here. That kind of stuff really
Mm,
can differentiate you from the pack. Make sure that you care about the job you're applying for. If you come into the interview and you're just like, I don't really want this job, I just need money, like that's probably going to come across in the interview. You have to actually want a position in sterile processing. Sterile processing is hard. It is a
yeah,
difficult life. And it's physically demanding, mentally demanding, emotionally demanding.
yeah,
And you can't just skate through SP and just take a paycheck home at the end of the week. You're going to be challenged every single day. So you have to want a job in sterile processing to get through it. And I think
yeah,
that's got to come across in your interview. You have to show, hey, I care about this. I am here because I really do want to do this sterile processing thing. And even if you're not experienced in sterile processing, um, you can still research as much as you can about the profession and say, I really like that we try to take care of patients the best we can. And that if a patient's surgery is successful, they go home healthy to their family. That's a really,
oh yeah,
and I think it's one of the biggest things about advantages of sterile processing is it really makes you feel like you're making a difference because you are. You're making a
Yeah.
difference in people's lives by taking care of them. So that passion and that caring about what it does and what this job is, really, I think that's the most important thing. Because as a hiring manager, that's what I want. I want somebody who cares about the
Yeah.
job. The other thing I want is I want somebody who's going to fit in with my team. So
Yeah.
if I get the sense that somebody's got a little bit of an ego or a little bit arrogant or something like that, I'm like, I don't know if this person's going to fit in with my team, which I'm trying to cultivate a good culture with. So you kind of
Yeah.
got to be aware of those kinds of things. Think about it from the hiring manager's perspective. What kind of person are they going to want to add to their
Mm.
department? And then be what they need you to be.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So those were fantastic tips. I think a great place to leave off with this one. I think you just gave him a golden tip, honestly, with the looking up the values and the mission of the facility. I mean that shows initiative and it shows your level of interest. There are a lot of people out there that want to be a part of a purpose-filled uh, position or career, but they're intimidated maybe by direct patient contact, like interfacing with a human that is sick. And I can totally understand that. And this could be your ticket to a meaningful, purpose-driven career, but you gotta get a little excited about it. You gotta get a little nerdy about it. You gotta show the manager that you mean business and that you care and that you want to make their lives easier. Um, because as a manager, we don't want the drama. We don't want arrogance. We don't want people who think they know everything. No way.
No.
Get out of here because you don't. And as soon as you think you know everything, the stuff changes. A new standard comes out. You know how it is. So, yeah, great tips, Adam. And I think this is a great episode. I really hope that people get a lot out of this because we need more professionals in sterile processing and ones that care and are purpose driven. And we hope that we helped our listeners out at least kind of get an idea of what a hiring manager is looking for and how to get started.